I'd like to welcome my guest, Andrew Bartzis. Good afternoon. How are you doing, mate?
Good, JP. How you doing today?
Not too bad. Yeah, things are crumbling around me, but I'm still in one piece, so that's all right.
The universe is giving you a test.
Yeah. I'd like to know what your feelings are about what's going to be happening this weekend. Astrologically, galactically, intuitively. Where do you want to start, Andrew?
Let's paint a broad picture here. I've brought this concept up a couple of times. Let's see the world as a spinning planet, and have the sun to our back. Well, we know on the opposite side of that spinning Earth, that's facing the blackness. So that's two sides of Earth. That is the basic representation of the separation between two worlds. We as a complete species of Earth-based citizens, not nation-based citizens, have a separated dream time. That is how the cabal basically controls us, with separate medias, separate governments, ways to devolve and separate us from achieving a unified dream state mind, where we as a conscious wholeness of people are able to reach into the earth mind and bring back information that helps us heal, helps us procreate, helps us evolve. On the 21st, think of a Jacob's ladder that starts at the South Pole, rises up out the North Pole, spreads to the outer edges of Earth's aura, comes back into the center of Earth, of the South Pole, back into the center, which is Earth mind, which completes the cycle that the outside hive mind that's on Earth's surface and the inside hive mind unify on the 21st, because it is a representation that Earth itself is going through the galactic change from winter to spring. We've talked about this ribbon of energy. We have talked about the galactic protons and the sun. All of that is part of this event, and is what I call the Great Migration of Spirits. 550,000 years ago, when Earth was ripped from its original galaxy during a time-based war and brought to this part of the galaxy to be a water nursery of creation to spawn life in other areas, the victors that controlled that realized that the people on Earth would ultimately want to return to its natural vibration in its other galaxy. That's when they began interfering with our species. They began interfering with what's going on in inner Earth, hollow Earth, and all the other realms that are Earth, because Earth is connected to 9 realms. And those 9 realms have stargates to thousands of other realms. Well, as people began to realize really what Earth was about, Earth herself, as a sentient, conscious planet, was terribly wounded from the rip out of her galaxy to this new galaxy. And she lit up a beacon of hope and asked spirits from around the galaxy to come to her and be healers. Spirits from Pleiades, Andromeda, from other galaxies and other universes and other dimensions heard this call, transformed out of flesh into energy, and went into the great galactic divide and used a homing signal to find Earth. When they entered the outer realms of Earth, they became astral beings again, and then began to incarnate as physical beings on Earth. Many of these people that came through spiritual form are what I call echolocators. They use a form of psychic projection out of their throat chakra, like whale sounds and dolphin sounds, and it is like a psychic echolocation and ability to communicate. These people incarnated as the first whale spirits, the first dolphin spirits, and their voice went around to the various parts of Earth Mother and used their sound as healing. That is why Earth and vibration are naturally in a healing state. That's why people that learn about sound and vibration understand that not only can the throat, the voice heal. Example, you have one of those voices of radio, and I have one of those voices of radio, but our voices connect to a level of truth that is a vibration. The same thing happens with those spirits that have echolocator. Now, as Earth goes through the 22nd, the 23rd, and the 24th, what it is each day, the Jacob's ladder will go out and come back in as the Earth spins around from light to dark, and we will begin to unify our dreams time as society. And people that are on the darkness and reject the two separate sides being brought together, those will be the people that will find themselves being rejected by Earthmind because they are ultimately rejecting the love of change. The Cabal itself will do whatever it can do to end this time, but they also know that the old way of separation, the 550,000 years of control that they've had, is gone. So things like the Aurora shooting are their new methods of control. Things like fear-based, fear porn and actual porn and using psychic entities to spread through the internet to take over people, that will be their new game. And it'll be up to people like you, me, Revolution Radio, Wolf Spirit Radio, to stand up and be leaders. Not leaders with power, leaders with knowledge. Because knowledge in the hands of people determines our future.
All right. So, what do you want to know about whales?
So, where did they first originate? Because they're shapeshifters, right?
They can be. Those lineages don't really live on our sub-ocean surfaces, though there are some that are there. They're just not in any type of mass at all. Where did the whales come from originally? So they are a technology that is very, very ancient so we have to go back to the time where we were a non-free-willed universe. There is where the creation of the whale skin suit would have come from a variety of ocean-based worlds that are actually no longer in existence. Those worlds, their starlight went out a long time ago. But they were rescued like refugee species by the founder beings that took over after free will was uploaded. So are they from a single homeworld? No, because we have so many lineages of whales. They became a common skin suit that could nurture the oceans as they were being grown by light ships and light beings that were bringing materials to grow fresh Akashic record worlds. Whale, as its initial skin suit, was a direct incarnation, so a spirit directly incarnated and created its own DNA lineage without egg and seed technology and manifested as a whale in conjunction with the planet, because the planet needed something to be of service to its oceans, and the creation of echolocation, the ability to trigger and activate other undersea ocean beings to have a higher form of density for a shorter period of time made it very beneficial for people to want to come in and be a small bait fish for a few months or a few years. Well, because they could get, high activations from the celestial spirits that were singing through the whale. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. What else would you like to know about them?
The frequencies of the sound. What levels that they influence when they make those different sounds?
Okay, on this world, they're a full 7-color being, and a whale's song can go directly into memory. It can bypass the brain through song, because it's a heart space to heart space song. So anything that's in heart space can directly hear whale's telepathic message through song. It's a matter of can it translates it to its I am awareness through its DNA technology. A whale is the embodiment of the DNA technology, the super technology, DNA technology of communion and union. It is a record keeper on many, 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 many worlds. That is not its only purpose, though. Whales can be healers, explorers. but they are truly the record keepers of above and below the ocean. That's one of their purposes, as well as maintaining the microorganism communities through song. Song can generate microorganism communities where there are no microorganism communities. They can bring the creationary forces of life in and around womb chakra or womb chakra-esque type areas. So their frequency is all the way into the purple spectrum of the crown, into the red spectrum and beyond. It is sound that can actually be light too. It can simultaneously be both light and sound.
So how could you use the whale sounds to elevate and activate certain parts of your brain? Is there any way to do that?
Through your tongue, believe it or not. So try making a whale song. The position of the tongue determines how your nasal passages or the sound of the song comes through. So truly like that, finding the right position of the tongue, the right position of the heart emanating energy, so I'm coming up through the tongue, so it makes a cavity in your mouth. The reason whale song is so powerful, there is a cavity that has a special oil inside it that makes the sound very, very intense. And that's the same oil that they were taking out of the whales for us to burn.
So when you're making that second sound, with the tongue up there, so that would carry the frequency all the way up to your 6th and 7th chakras then.
Yep. As well as activate your throat chakra to have a front and a back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Also very powerful if you have activated your cranial pulse.
Yep.
And if you find that one little indentation on the roof of your mouth, and if you put the tip of your tongue in the roof of your mouth in that little indentation, and you first mimic the sounds until you find your sound that emanates your heart space with your cranial pulse activated, that's where the essence of the experience of feeling all of the universe is profound.
Yep. It can trigger visions, all sorts of things. Position of the tongue. The tongue is the second sacred organ after the heart is created.
So do they position themselves in certain parts of the world for, because there's different whales in different areas, and I'm just wondering whether it's because they're drawn to those types of frequencies of Mother Earth to where they can do their most work.
The answer is yes to that question, but because the amount of whales have been cut down dramatically and drastically over the last 700 years, the amount of species that are out there are far less. It was species specific. You could have several species that would come to one area, and each of their song would amplify the area in a different way, in a different format. As the species began to killed off, whales started passing on song lines, and those were the wisdom of all the other whales that were passed on through spiritual communities and their versions of dealing with the Blue Road ancestors. Because the underwater world is full of ancestral beings that are other whale spirits that are teaching the whale songs to continue forth, so that even though 3/4 to 90% of all whale species have been eliminated, their song still carries on in those that have been incarnating in other lineages.
Okay. And so they also do they exist in the spirit world then too, so that they can?
Yes, very much do. They have their own astral cities or astral sea cities. Mm-hmm. Their own version of whale astral cities.
It's just that when I was reading that part, so it's as above, as below, with the whales or with the ocean. So as above, as below. So we're getting so the whale cities in the astral world are also making universal or galactic changes or balance.
The whale astral cities would actually be in the oceans, not in the stratosphere like our astral worlds.
Oh, okay.
And they would be around, sacred spaces and sacred sites.
On the planet?
Yes. In the ocean version of the planet.
Right.
See, there are also deep underground tunnels and chambers that actually connect the oceans through all the continents. And that's an ancient tunnel system that was created on Earth, since the founding of the planet. It has collapsed and caved in many areas, and the secret space programs and the deep underground bases have reconnected some of them. But a whale can go from the East Coast in America and travel on deep underground and still be able to get to oxygen through these great underwater chambers that allow the life force to go through continents. There are tunnels for them.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah. And there's a lot of life inside those tunnels.
And so when people, when there's whales are being hunted, and there's certain groups of people who have become very outraged, do they have an ancestral connection with the whales because they've got such a drawing to protect them?
Because most of them are still in the zealot and martyr process, yes, there's some form of ancestral lineage to justify, justicate, adjudicate, bring something that is not necessarily remedy and resolve. They're forcefully putting themselves in harm's way, meaning they are still stepping on the journey of another. Mm. So those that are in driving and crashing into whale boats, that's their choice and is putting their life at risk, and is truly stepping on the journey of that whale and that whaling boat. A common moral code of do no harm to any sentient kind comes into play, but at what level of responsibility do you have? Do you martyr yourself by dying in front of that boat? No. You find another way to be more effective with your message.
Right. And so people, when they go swimming with like even with the dolphins and stuff like that, so the dolphins are a total separate entity to the whale energy, right?
Yeah, totally separate skin suit. Yeah.
Yeah, skin suit. So they have a different purpose. But I'm just wondering, do people get attracted to spending, getting into the energies of the whale pods that they have? Would that create some sort of healing, or can pick up any of their frequencies that can help?
Yes. So think of it this way. I just said before in the other recording, there were 8 million whaling boats out there at the peak of the whaling process for 600, 700 years. Fish. The other thing is, what brought those people there was the whaling industry, believe it or not.
Hey, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay? Got to realize the generation before that, why did they leave? The whaling industry was going through the roof there, and they needed people to service all the employees that were on the whaling boats.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, because we actually get like humpback whale and that sort of whale that breeds south of my city. Yeah, near where I get the womb chakras. Yeah. Like they come and they carve up there like during the cold winter. Like taken away from the Arctic, and then they go back down this time of year. So
Yep. And you can imagine what it was like back then. Whaling worldwide, there could be as many as, ungodly amounts. 8 million boats out there?
Well, my mother talks about her father, like my grandfather was like 190, early 90s. So he was born like 18, 1896, something like that. And they talk about how their generation, like, they had uncles that were whalers and
Yep.
stuff like that. So
Yeah. It had its own culture.
absolutely.
They would go out 10 months a year, make a boatload of money, give it to their family, and go back out. 10 months a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, they actually south of my, like an hour or so south, they actually did a lot of the slaughtering of the whales, and over in Western Australia as well. And I remember, like, one of my stories my mum told was that it would take them a week to adjust to the horrible stench.
Yep.
You know, like, they would be vomiting for a week to get adjusted to it after having a break. You know, that's how bad she could it smell. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Because they would boil the blubber to get the oil and stuff, you know.
And then boil the blubber.
Yeah, yeah. But absolutely, oil, like whale oil, was such a it was before, like, because I did that oil recording that you talked about, and how oil sort of came into the world, but before that, whales were the tool, like,
It was either something called naphtha or whale oil.
yeah.
You know, they could
like,
process.
like you bringing that up is, like, just a reminder how, like, vast our society has changed, because absolutely whaling was a fundamental to the progress of the time, you know.
And whaling was what? How many thousand year? At least 1,000-year industry. But it doesn't matter. They did whaling whenever they came to the shore. They would just drag the whales back to the shore to boil the blubber off.
Yeah.
Once they figured out how to get a furnace on a boat, they hunted whales.
Yeah.
Which wasn't that hard to get a furnace on a boat.
No. But again, it's such a lost fragment of our civilization that just people don't really contemplate, you know.
Example of off-world gene selection processing. They didn't want the species here. Invading species. We don't want it in the DNA. Kill it. Use it to light your house because we're not giving you electricity.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, look at that. You're agreeing to burn the blood flesh of a true love being. Oh, look at that. Tacit consent.
Wow, yeah.
That's what those fake higher density god beings think that they can do when they get you to burn whale blubber. Yeah, but I look at it a neutral perspective from an understanding that was their goal. Well, their goal is over now. They aren't winning. Can't win in non-competition.
So, like, I mean, I've done that oil sort of recording where you saw it. You said it's like the craniosacral fluid. Right?
Uh-huh.
Like, what was it that made the incentive to go to oil from the earth better than whale oil? Because you said that whales are like the true love being, like being absolutely destroyed and, you know, used in that way.
Because they had already culled enough whales and they got down to the skin suits that they wanted. Different deals were made with the undersea populations. That's why the whales were being culled in the first place, because the undersea organizations had their own issues with those DNAs, because the undersea was trying to have its own unique pattern of DNA and sort of skin suits to incarnate in. And there were certain skin suits that could, you know, really screw up their plans.
Yeah.
Okay, and the plans were where did they go to breed, which was the 7 future generations. So if the whales were constantly in that area breeding and making the energy come out that they didn't want, and they wanted to put their more aggressive species or their more feeder species in, they needed to get rid of the whales. Competition to their DNA engineering.
Cool. So I get what you're saying. Like even like Mandy, you probably haven't heard it yet, but in that recordings I've done, the 780 to 200 BC ones, you go into the actual volumes of life in the different regions, like the hollow earth, the inner earth, the undersea, the on top of like the lands and the volumes of life, and each have their own hierarchy, if you will. So just going back to like the life under the sea, what sort of beings were they?
Okay, we have
that 20 billion you said, which is like far more than on the surface.
So let's use the common things: dolphins, mermaids, whales, killer whales, octopus, squid. Those would all be sentient skin suits that traveled in soul families. So those would all represent soul families that are really working on the predator-prey concept.
Okay, so not like civilizations, like say in
They did develop civilizations in the Dreamweave, but that was their purpose. So like whales and dolphins, they're there in the physical world and have a manifest, but they can seamlessly enter the dream world, similar to like kind of what I do.
Yeah, like operating like the song line sort of thing, and yeah.
Right. So they did create infrastructure of dreaming constructs that they could share with future generations that did have a civilization. It's just not as we understand it.
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So then you have like ones that actually had civilizations, like the mermaids. They would actually have cities and shit like that, villages.
Because I mentioned Aquaman before, and it's like a human water being sort of thing, like the mermaids.
Well, that existed, but the underwater worlds had basically told the surface worlds, if you guys are going to start investing down here, you have to, follow a different type of United Nations, because there was an underwater United Nations and a surface United Nations that always didn't always get along with each other. And same thing with Hollow Earth.
Yeah.
Just big political bureaucracies that didn't always get along with each other. So there were times that the South Americans, the Africans, the Greeks, the Asians wanted to make their own version of underwater beings, and that did start a breeding war in which basically the surface people got the shit kicked out of them over and over and over again. But genetics were introduced into the ocean that began advanced competition for areas, and then underwater mining and all this other stuff. So you had a variety of other merfolk type species that were like the Bigfoots of their underwater world.
Yeah, so also, the incarnation invasion also, was it all corrupting all these societies all at the same time?
Yes, and then you have big schools of
talking mining and political organizations going at each other. Obviously, there was infiltration, and it was corrupting, over a period of time. So
right,
yeah.
And then you have the big schools of fish, the tuna, the krill, the big fish, the big schools of fish, that they could assemble in, 50 or 60 million tuna still regularly, migrate from one part of Hawaii to another, to North America. So that was even bigger than we can even understand, but that type of life form that was coming into a tuna was actually, how do I put this? It was a way to train a personality soul over a series of long life, because a tuna could live 100, 150 years back then before it was caught, or depending on if it was preyed on, but it could refine its density so that once it was deciding not to be a tuna anymore, it could easily jump into a more advanced skin suit.
So the soul had more control over their fate as well.
Yeah.
It wasn't so hijacked the incarnation process. Yeah.
It eventually became hijacked because they wanted to speed up that process instead of letting it be organic.
Yeah. I mean, like, so the individual in their migration to Earth, they had free will over their fate was more the truth than the discourse.
So they had dreaming abilities too. They could enter, the dream weave of the ocean, or the dream weave of the higher Earth. That was part of their special ability. So, and at times, even specialized versions of tunas that don't exist now would come inland, up rivers, much like sharks come into their fresh water at times, and then they would literally grow legs and transform into a human. And so it was a shapeshifter organization. Yeah. And then skin suit got eliminated when they didn't want shapeshifters around anymore. So let's move on to like common fish, like cod. Everyone eats cod.
Yeah.
It's a big white fish, or grouper, anything like that. Yeah. So those were actually high commodities to bring to other worlds, because other worlds had a really hard time creating all the stuff that oceans needed. So it was highly sought after to find an ancient cod or an ancient grouper that actually had a soul in it, that had done it a bunch of times, that was willing to go to another ocean on another world, to be a chief spirit of incarnation on another world.
That's interesting, because like the Asian communities, they revere fish.
Yeah.
Certain fish quite like they honor them a lot. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because on some level they're tuning into that being. Yeah.
And then there's a variety of other fishy suits that do similar things that are in fresh water, and then there are certain types of fish like smelt, which is common all over the world. It's a bait fish or a feeder fish, but it can massively reproduce itself many times per year.
Yes.
And if you use some of that essence that the Aztecs did, along with that, you could make mass breeding areas. So you could literally have an entire ocean of bait fish, and then suddenly introduce a handful of predators which will massively breed, and you can stabilize a new ocean.
But then, like, also in times of like absence of food, you can reanimate like sources of food quick as well.
Well, right, because they could store 50 billion smelt eggs, and then transport them through time, and they'd always have a food source.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
But I get what you're saying, like populating new sort of oceans with the hierarchy of like life to get it going, like in a whole system. Like so, Undersea has got 20 billion in total life beings under the sea, and then there's the Undersea UN and all that sort of stuff. So what you're sort of saying is that the whales were seen as a threat to that undersea hierarchy, basically, and were given the go-ahead to get rid of sort of specific frequencies in that, because of competition to the incarnation sort of like hijacking and DNA harvesting and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I get it.
And they also needed to get people out of those skin suits by eliminating a lineage on the surface, which means they had to choose another skin suit. That's another option, another thing behind it. If you kill the entire pod, you can't incarnate back into a lineage that's very ancient.
Yeah.
But that was the other thing. There was such ancient lineages in them. that held the records. They needed to get them out. And,
the knowledge is lost, so we gain a foothold over the amnesia, The target was to generate amnesia at the soul and DNA levels, no matter what. So, yeah, you've mentioned like war, like when a culture gets to like a 10% soul family like reunion sort of threshold, then war is usually brought to a region. So it's like it's consciousness war, understanding the full gamut of the purpose of the DNA, no matter what the skin suit. When we come from a place of ignorance, we don't know. Fascinating.
Yeah. That's because there were 7 to 10 billion whales in the ocean that were conscious sentient beings, which were us. Just about everyone that has lived in a human skin suit at one point was a whale. Okay? They needed to get them out of incarnating into whales and into human skin suits, so that was the reason many of them were killed off. There were too many options of incarnation. So just about everyone has lived in a whale skin suit and have had to deal with that process of, passing on fast because something speared you.
Right. Another question I was going to say is because there's the different types of whales in the different areas and everything, do they choose those areas also to maintain a certain balance within the ocean?
Yes, they have ancestral grounds that they go to pray to. Just like we have ancestral prayer grounds in sacred spaces, they have their own versions of that in the ocean. And they are specific to certain kind of whales. When a large volume of the species of whales died off, other whales took up the mantle of responsibility and began singing in those areas that didn't have a species that was singing in it anymore.
And is this what's helping the Earth to keep maintain its balance with all the other damaging effects that have been going on?
Yes, as well as helping the microorganism communities, which are the krill and the shrimp and all the other stuff that are on the lowest part of the food chain.
Okay.
Because that is what the whales are feeding off of, is those microorganisms, like the humpbacks and stuff. And then you have other versions of whales that eat a little bit bigger sized fish or whatever.
So is there any human species that can actually telepathically connect with the whales? Is that a
Everyone can. Oh. Everyone can telepathically connect to the whales. It's a matter of if your parasympathetic is going to allow you to grow a companionship.
Right. And can they? And if you do telepathically connect with them, can you also get connect to the wisdom of what they can carry?
Yes, because they can bypass the brain and have a conversation with you through memory. So yes, they have an ability to upload a tremendous amount of data and information to you, which are the meta messages.
Right, because you're saying that they also hold a lot of the Akashic records. They're like a
record keepers.
Record keepers.
Yes.
So then if you could learn to telepathically connect with them, then you can also access a lot of their records or their information?
Through song, yes.
Through song.
Yes, it's encoded into their song, all their records. So hearing a whale's completed song line allows you to have all of its wisdom.
Oh, that's amazing.
Okay.
Well, I'll let somebody else ask questions now.
How does the whale connect with us in dream time?
Okay, it is a non-duality being. That's the first thing. It is a non-competitional being, a non-hierarchical order being. So it can connect to us in our 5th density dreaming frequency. So when we become awake in the dream, we are in between 3rd and 4th density trying to deal with whatever last processes are still holding us as the density manifest. A whale is beyond the density manifest. It can actually manifest or unmanifest his body at will if it wants. But it chooses to stay manifest to keep up those song lines. So You can connect to them through dream in the song line, direct dreaming with them, knowing where their spawning grounds are, remote viewing, remote experiencing, clairvoyance, clairaudience, all sorts of ways to entangle with them as etheric bodies and or dreaming bodies.
And whale also maintains the dreamtime bubbles of reality also?
That's not its sole function. There are other beings in the world, in the ocean, that do that, but it will service that until something else can spawn and take up that mantle of responsibility. So technically, whale can cover any job on Earth for a short period of time if it has to. Trying to think what else.
And where would of the dream of the skin suit of whale with the technology that whale carries, where would that have come from?
The dreaming technology?
No, meaning that the skin suit and the capabilities of whale itself, where would that construct have been thought up or dreamt up? Where did that come from?
Okay, so what I was saying in the beginning of the recording, whale was a common species before it was a free-willed universe, and it would have been used to support oceans. So it would have started billions of years ago, before there was even Akashic records shared between worlds. So it's that ancient of a technology. What is here on Earth is not the most ancient of whale technology. That did exist here on Earth, but many of the Divinity Path Wars eliminated those lineages from here, though they exist on other worlds now, and they will once again return here when the time is right. Because there are other species who will create vessels that are basically giant ocean vessels that will travel this transverse space and time and drop them off here like a bus. So they existed, their technology existed long before, and it's gone through several thousand iterations of new expression. What has evolved here is a series of whale skin suits that began about 45 million years ago that tried to bring or leapfrog in lineages much more ancient than what was existing here. That worked for a long period of time until the Divinity Path Wars tried to really cut out those advanced DNAs. So a variety of in-between whale skin suits were created between 17 million and 9 million years ago that began to figure out the type of skill sets the incarnating beings into whales would need to effectively use light and sound to change the holographic reality of the ocean and non-ocean sides. So it's holographically affecting the incarnation, reincarnation process for those that are healing the whale song from whale to whale, pod to pod, or whale pod to tuna going down the direction, going down the pike, whatever. So because everything in the ocean can hear the song. And it's a matter, are they tuning into the song to hear heart space, to hear the connections and messages, or are they using the whale song to chart their own course because everything is in a homeostasis and equal co-creation, and the whale songs at the chief of that location are spreading echolocation processes so other beings and spirits know where to go and what to do. So it was a refinement of skills over the last many millions of years on Earth so that the existing whale suits and skin suits from, let's say, 9,000 BC to our current days, there would have been about, 500,000 different species of whales that lived on the surface of or the subsurface of our world from 9,000 BC till now. That's how much their populations have been reduced, or viable skin suit options have been reduced that have gone into extinction, or were time traveled out of this reality and put back into the ancient past. That was another really big thing that was done with them. When they realized it was very tough to kill the whole lineage, they just started scanning the oceans, capturing them, time traveling them back 40 million years ago. Catch and release. Time travel, catch and release.
So how would if it does in fact, how would the ascension machine affect the whales in our oceans now?
All right, so those whales in our oceans now would be fully contracted from the very beginning of the Galactic Ascension machine to hold their final space, not as zealots and martyrs, but as heart space being, showing that a single lineage can go from the beginning to the end. A lineage of light beings can go from the beginning to the end, even if you had to rapidly change out skin suits. It's another reflection that human beings are also going through to stay in that heart space connection.
Wow. Debbie?
I've got questions.
Sure.
Yeah, I've been just amassing a few, like, staying in the background. But, like you mentioned that there were sort of refugee species that were from a long time ago. What's their current status throughout, like, the galaxy and the universe, if they're like a refugee from sort of planets that have been lost, sort of thing, or concepts that have been lost?
Beautiful question. They're not really refugee species anymore as highly sought after communities that are wanted to be seeded into oceans. So here on Earth, because they chose to kill them off instead of sell them off, you have a much more refugee concept here from Earth. But in general, whales are again, one of the highly sought after macro ocean organisms that can maintain microorganism life, be a intermediary with the celestial process to engage celestial heartstrings, heart songs, to change the growth patterns of micro to macro organisms, the whole food chain, to bring things into balance where there might be war, to be record keepers of the oceans, to be the imprinters of the water that eventually become moisture, that become air, that become rain on the future. So the whale is imprinting the message of the celestial mind through the communion and union technology. What the rains are going to have, the message, it's going to change the surface, change and alter the reality, change frequencies of time even. So whales are not refugee species now. They're, again, the most highly sought after. There are whales from other worlds who can live in the ocean, reach a certain age of enlightenment, and then literally lift up out of the ocean, and they are their own space whale ship. And then they can swim through the ocean of space-time and come to another world, bypass its astral world, go directly in the water, find a sacred space, astral space of the underwater communities, and then directly incarnate as the whale that traveled from another world.
That reminds me of this. I've got a note for the Star Trek 4 movie where they had to travel back in time to get a whale to bring it back into the present time.
Right.
Because the satellite was coming into the the solar system, and it was just, it was broadcasting a beacon to the song, and the song that the whale had was the code to deactivate it.
Yep.
So you sort of said that they go to other worlds to populate. Do they have what sort of relationship do they have with the womb chakras on planets?
Oh, so that's like the whale's greatest place of enlightenment. Finding a planet that has one womb chakra and nurturing it like a like a hummingbird that comes to drink the sacred nectar.
Yeah.
Or to work with that, because you're so closely connected with the celestial being, whether it's a masculine, feminine, or multi-sex planet, you get, they get some great education, great education.
So they can sense them throughout the universe. So is that something?
Planets sing. Planets always have their own background Schumann resonance, which is a song. Yeah. Planets sing to each other, and whales can hear that. Just like, we can remote view or remote hear things, they can do the same thing.
So it's like a language, the planets that have their own language that the whales can pick up on.
Yes. It's just that language has much more information behind it, and a whale will take the time to decode the massive amounts of information and figure out what the celestial song is.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a lot of other questions, but obviously I've talked about Richard Allen Miller, and he's fascinated by the whales and the orcas and stuff, and how their brain fires at 60% of their capacity and stuff.
Yep.
I mean, these are sort of fragments of their capacity, I guess you're sort of offering.
Yes. So there's no true study of what the whales can do. I mean, there are secret studies that, have revealed a small sampling of what they can do. And, many of the secret scientists realize our whales, when they're in their fullest of song, are operating at 95 to 100% of their brain capacity. There's plenty of proof of species throughout our history that can use 100% of their brain capacity. It's whether of other beings observing it believe it or not.
Yeah, it's like science is wrong.
Yeah.
Science doesn't understand it. That's all.
Because it's a direct challenge to their hierarchical structure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In ancient Lemuria, like you've talked about the three Lemurias in Atlantis eras, what sort of relationship did that have to the whales then?
So whales could reweave the oceans from damage. They could, when brought together in a communal process with the planet and the Atlanteans and or Lemurians, whoever was in charge of the surface, they could amass in great pods and actually create a song that could repel a time travel attack. Now, whales have been used in offensive combats, but they are a non-hierarchical order, non-duality, defensive, offensive system, meaning they can use their dreamweave frequency to make a species think they've invaded and destroyed the place, but actually they never did.
So the civilization had a relationship with the whales, like they could communicate with them and they understood all their language and things like that?
No, more like the beings are coming here to destroy us, and the whale could project their song and the being would suddenly be in a dream world and would never realize that it went from the real to the dream.
It's interesting you say that, like, about events that might cause harm, because I told you I've watched Stargate Atlantis recently, and there was an episode where, like, they're on the city, and there's whale creatures on the water planet where they are, and all of a sudden they start being triggered to gather around the city and sing their song. And the psychic people in the community start really like hemorrhaging right through their ears and stuff like that.
Yep.
And what the whales were picking up on, long story short, was they perceived a future solar flare from the sun in the solar system, and they were actually like calling out in a unity consciousness way of gathering around the city and asking for help, but because the Earthlings that had repopulated Atlantis, they didn't know what was going on, and they were being injured, and they were like thinking the whales are the issue, but then they realised that a solar flare was going. And
yes, I remember that episode.
Yeah, it was brilliant, because they worked in partnership to defend the community, but each other. They worked in partnership. It was very well done.
That's actually probably soft disclosure from the Atlantean Holler records that actually came out into a Stargate Atlantis storyline.
Yeah, like they actually had to raise the city and go towards the sun and block it with the shield of the city at a closer point to create a block, and then it relieved the whole situation, and the whales could actually, I believe the whales actually tapped into the consciousness of the people there as well, and did stuff. It was very interesting.
So,
yeah, go
on. One layer to add to that, defending the story. I've talked about in the Galactic history the 3 rises and falls of Atlantis, the 3 rises and falls of Lemuria, and that we've had 4 timeline paradoxes or uncreational events. There have actually been thousands of potentially more uncreational events that were thwarted with some assistance from the whales community. When both light and dark suddenly realize another force that isn't light or dark, has no expression of light or dark, but is its own conquering, evolving force from another part of the galaxy or another galaxy itself, something that is just going to overtake everything and retake it with its own imprint. The light and dark of this community got together, and when that happened, the whales would say, all right, you're in communion and union, we're going to defend this world. And there were many, many stories where we simply call them the non-hierarchical order whale warriors stepped forward, which meaning human beings in both the light and dark skin suits passed off their contracts as DNA skin suits and directly incarnated in whale skin suits as walk-ins with their full knowledge of esoteric processes, whooped the snot out of whatever was invading, and then left the DNA skin suits and went back into their human skin suits, as the whales allowed them into their technology to use the weaponized expressions of their belief systems, and the whale would store that in their song line.
I've got some questions related to the culling and stuff. Have there been species that could teleport to get away from the hunters and stuff?
So a whale, when it gets good enough with its song and knows the nuances of the ocean and current, it can have its song go several hundred miles ahead of it. And wherever its song is actually a section of its consciousness. So we can, instead of teleport, we'll say relocate itself within the sound wave. It's not teleporting, it's relocating, as well as multi-locating within the sound wave also, phased in or out of reality. So a whale is a living, breathing DNA skin suit of non-hierarchical order, meaning it's completely different of everything else that's a hierarchical species learning predator-prey in a 3rd density world. So it's a 4th density or a 5th density being living a non-hierarchical process in communion and union with the celestial process to make sure the celestial system, internal running system, is going right. You can associate whales like antibodies of a blood system, or other things, that are created by a celestial mind to fend off smaller parasitic consciousnesses that are trying to alter the food chain. And the whale's song will simply disrupt whatever light program is trying to be imprinted into that DNA frequency. So in a non-competition, non-hierarchical way, they can simply just say, no, that's no good, and it stops. They just remove the light encoding or the weaving that they're trying to do through sound. Their song line.
They're a bit like the shaman of the sea.
Yeah, the shaman, sorcerer, but more like ascended master of the sea. But very loyal to the celestial being and the celestial process. Very loyal, very honoring to that. And they're not martyrs, though that does pop up because so many of them have been killed off.
So, you've talked about the killing and culling and stuff, say, for the last 1,000 years. But obviously it's gone on for a bit longer. Like, was there something that really sparked off that?
Yes. So let me go back to the 3rd rise of Lemuria. So 23 to 21 million years ago, it took for Lemuria to re-rise into, let's just say, as a intergalactically recognized hub of DNA technology. Earth would be right around low 6th density, high 5th density at that time. The other destructions and timeline paradoxes that existed were created when the original founders left this section of the galactic cluster, meaning there were a group of founder beings that were here and said, hey, let's everyone get in RVs and go look at the celestial mysteries of the universe, and they left their DNA farms here, all of their creationary farms. Humanity, in approximately 900,000 skin suits, occupied this star cluster and several thousand other star clusters within a galactic cluster. And there are billions of star clusters in a galactic cluster. So there are other founder beings who were not related to the ones that had created the human skin suits, who also had their versions of experiments or DNA constructs. They also left. Those inheritors of the technology of everyone that left were their top-end intelligent skin suits. Those beings began to look for the founders, and what they found was everyone else's farm, everyone else's experiment. Species like the Draco became dominant right away and realized that many of these beings had no defense at all, because many of the founders never fought each other. There was only a handful of recorded concepts where they fought. Other beings began to create defensive systems, and this is when high-density light beings came into this galactic star cluster and started to try to make things right. Like bring in sheriffs to the town. The whales were the second wave of what was brought to worlds to help end the chaos of newly discovered free will. Does that fit what you were asking?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So that they became a target by their effort to defend.
Yes. So there were perspectives that were freshly earned from free will, that you have this DNA skin suit that's being put into our oceans that's reweaving our water. How do we know what they're doing? Why don't we know their song? Because you're not in heart space. You've lost your heart space.
Yeah.
You're not connected to the world. This is where lots of light beings discovered many DNA skin suits in the human 900,000 lineages, and many others actually weren't connected to a tree of life. You had some lazy founders, or founders that were doing something specific, like trying to make a rapidly producing war species, or something that would be used to a single off lineage species that could create 1 trillion of them in a handful of years to build one project that would be done in 90 years, and then all of that species would die off. Like an actual fuse. Like there are many of them that were like that. And this really made it tough for the beings that stepped in this area to be the good light beings, because the founder beings left. Brought whales, different species of them that had shape-shifting skills that could shape-shift out of the water and go and meet land mammals that were also creations of the founders that were there to upkeep the predator-prey network. Many of the founder species, they stuck with the original blueprint of first density was a world that was just a shell that had no celestial source, but it would have innate source background energy about it, meaning something unusual could spawn there. A second density world is source has spawned there and attracted a variety of density beings. So whatever, it was free reign territory, whatever evolutionary, unforced evolutionary light source was coming through could use those processes. Third density is when a celestial mind has joined source and created an akashic record that has ancestral linkages based off of the celestial mind or spirit in all of the soul families it's ever lived in as a micro or macro being. So that gives a list of potentiality for light streams and soul families who want to come and be a first founding species on a world. Whales were oftentimes brought in as first founder species once a macro or micro community of ocean life, usually the smallest forms of ocean life, were created. So the initial foundation of incarnation rules were set up. The celestial mind created its first spawn of, we'll say, dragon energy, which is photonic lights of creation created by the celestial mind to have an individual relationship with every spawn being on its surface and subsurface. So the creation and infrastructure. A whale would be a skin suit that could come into a fresh Akashic record world and help them tune up the micro communities so new layers of macro communities can be added on to it.
Fascinating. I do have some questions about that, but I just want to stay on the elimination sort of topic just quickly. So that third Lemuria, right?
Okay.
Till now, so ever since then they've been a target, and that was
here on our world, yes, because by the third Lemuria, what had happened is other species as refugees had came and lived here because other forced evolutionary species were destroying worlds, and Earth decided to be the good guys again and take refugees here.
Yeah.
As part of a DNA farming process. So if you came here as a refugee species, you became part of a greater DNA experiment, which was getting the more powerful souls to come and live in this world and experience its wonders, which included me having to defend it. Okay? They were trying to make a hub of soul families so they can have a maximum number of skin suits on the surface or subsurface or hollow Earth. They wanted, 10 trillion beings to live on the surface, 20 trillion beings to live underground, and 500 trillion to live in the astral. That was their goal. Trillions, not billions, trillions, yeah. And that's, when you have that many trillions beings in one place, forced evolutionary consciousness, collective consciousness, species, etc., that's a big target. But you have this as a common theme of how all throughout the galactic clusters, things just collect into greater forms of light, greater forms of knowledge sharing, and then they become targets in this star cluster, in this galactic cluster.
Yeah, I understand that. So because their work is in relation to the harmony of the universe and finding the maximum on any world or whatever like that, that goes against domination by its very nature, because to dominate a world, like say for Earth, like you said, Earth is by nature a 7 density seed planet with the 200 womb chakras that populate life throughout the universe, and in order to control Earth, the density's been reduced to a 3D sort of aspect, so we don't have our dormant abilities that would be there and present in a higher aspect. So whales are core to that in the universe to limit it, which then therefore makes them a target. Yeah.
So once Lemuria raised to its peak and you had 50 trillion living on the surface, so that's 2-legged, 4-legged, skinned, walked, finned, everything else. Now, everything was a community in the dream world that still allowed a predator-prey process of evolution. What that did was make the gates of immigration far greater, so you could accept second density world transference beings who could rapidly become a true third density, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, or eighth density, because so many teacher spirits were here. It was a way of rapidly raising the knowledge base of a galactic cluster. Just by the forms of life that you could live on here. You could be a minnow one day and die, come back to the astral, have a full life review, come back in as a tadpole, live 3 days, die, come back, have a life review with great teachers, come back and be a whale, and literally have to learn a whole new skin suit. Or you could work through all the microorganisms until you got to the next and the next and the next, or something that had some form of ancestral relation found you in the soup of predator-prey, and you formed love. Then you could come out of that skin suit and directly incarnate into the skin suit you have love with.
I've got 2 more questions, and Mandy, I'll hand it back to you if you want. Just on that elimination topic and coming a bit more into the recent sort of times, like I know like the military, they have sonars that are really affecting sort of the undersea life and the beaching.
Yeah.
Is that warfare, like to eliminate them specifically, or a byproduct, like the sonar and the beachings? Yeah.
It is a byproduct that has been used as a direct targeting now. It wasn't designed to kill whales. When they realized it did, they retuned it so it could kill a lot more. And it is used to break up pods that are beginning the ascension process in krill itself. It's microorganisms. Because the whales possess a unique power that whenever there are advanced aurora borealises, their programmed water is being affected in that aurora borealis as moisture. So their song is in that water, which is absorbing direct sunlight, which is directly being absorbed into the whale. Doesn't matter what through time it is, as long as it holds their song line. So they can use that direct solar energy and through song focus it on microorganisms such as krill, which is what they eat, or shrimp, something that at the very low end, and actually begin the ascension process in them. They raise the consciousness of the krill so that they form one, there's a billion krill in a big ball, and they're a collective consciousness of krill that have all the knowledge and wisdom of the whole song line in it. So yes, they would be killed off to stop that process.
And I mentioned brief, like the beachings and stuff. I had an aspect of understanding that they were sometimes brought about by the Earth's magnetic field. Is that a relationship that they have? And then the shifting in the magnetic field causes the breaching, or it's something a bit more?
It is more nefarious than that.
Okay.
When the ley lines began to be hijacked, they discovered beachings that really didn't occur before that. The only times beachings would occur before that was when there was some kind of timeline attack that was more affecting on the oceans than the surface, and there was lots of time aphasia between the whales, and they literally, their song would bleed through time and they wouldn't know where they were. And then they beach themselves. So when you had the Philadelphia experiment create the big rift, it began that process on a big scale on the Atlantic Ocean. There was another version of that that happened in the Dragon's Triangle off Japan that caused that same beaching process. And then when France used a neutron bomb in part of the Indian Ocean, it did that again for the Indian Ocean. So you have whales that are bleeding through time, that are crashing on the surface of that. And then the hijacking of the ley lines, so those whales that did survive and recovered the bleed through, the ley lines were different of the world. Then there was the natural energy line, and then there was the fake energy line. So many of them followed the fake energy line, which were dark portal creations designed to lure them to there so they became captured and sacrificed, which is why the whaling industry was so successful for so long. So a lot of, let's say, dark sorcery was done before the industry of whaling as we know it today was created, with the intention of gathering the most powerful souls out of those whale communities and trying to force them into human lineages.
Yes.
Soul transference into human lineages.
Yeah, you mentioned that in the first industrial age sort of recording I've just done. Yeah.
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 So that would have been a very, very old thing that has done here on Earth, which is taking the big great souls out of one lineage and forcing them into another through the dark magic.
With reduced capacity in their ability to have an expression. Yeah.
Yes, because they wanted to create breeding things. So if they found a female whale that was incredibly super full powerful, it went into a DNA lineage that would make, controlled sacred feminine, everything around them is controlled, and all they're doing is birthing, the worst, things that are going to be warriors.
Yeah, yeah.
Instead of whales.
Do you have
The same done with horses too.
Actually, Andre, you have hit everything that I have been writing down. So as you're asking them, I'm just, okay, take that off.
Yeah.
Next. You're just... So absolutely, keep going, Andre.
No, I think there's a lot there. Like, I'll need to process that. I think that was very dense. Like, you went pretty expansive, which is really good.